So let's get into it. Let's get into some Super Bowl reaction because, first of all, that was a phenomenal game. 35-35 coming down the stretch there. I thought both quarterbacks played great. Both teams played really well. There were plays made, plays not made. It was lining up to be an all-time finish in the Super Bowl. There's no doubt about it. Chiefs end up winning 38-35. I picked the Chiefs on the show last week, as you know. And before I get into the actual game, I do just want to say, like, from a Fox perspective, I thought our guys did an awesome job. I really did. The crew, Z, the producer of the show, obviously Kevin and Greg, EA, Tom, everyone did a phenomenal job. Pre-game, post-game. I was really proud of Fox. I thought it looked great. I thought it sounded great. And more specifically, for a couple of guys to be in their first year as the lead team in the NFL, Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olsen did a great job on that Super Bowl, and they've been doing a great job all year long. So it's really no surprise to me. In this industry, it's really easy to root for great people, and Kevin Burkhardt is one of those types of guys. I'm a huge fan of Kevin Burkhardt, and this is nothing against Troy and Joe. Obviously, I love both of those guys as well, and Joe Buck is legendary and phenomenal at his job. I was just happy for Kevin yesterday. I thought he did a great job calling that game, rose to the occasion, and obviously Greg was insightful and prepared. And from my seat, here's what I want. 2 cents, by the way, from a broadcaster. Here's what I want in a broadcast. I want a play-by-play guy that understands the nuts and bolts and then doesn't go past that. And I want an analyst that is very prepared and is looking forward and not always backward all the time. That's really that's my utopia for watching a game. That's what I try to do when I'm in the booth with Gus. And I thought those two guys did a fantastic job. So Kevin, Greg, congratulations. Many more to come, hopefully, and we'll see how it all pans out. Greg's going to be in some lead seat for a long time, so we'll see where that's at. Okay, now the game itself. The game was a classic, which it won't be remembered as a classic Super Bowl only for the way that it finished. And obviously, everybody is talking about the holding call there that effectively gave the Vince Lombardi trophy to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that the hard part about it, and I'm not going to get really into like what was said after the game. I understand Bradbury admitted I tugged on his jersey and I was hoping there was no call. Yeah, listen, I understand that. I'll get to that in a little bit. Smith-Schuster, by the way, ran a great route. Right? There's a reason why a defensive player has to get handsy, and it's generally because there's a sense of urgency within the route and the route structure from the wide receiver. So Juju Smith-Schuster did a wonderful job on that little whip route. It was a great design. and by the way, the red zone that the Chiefs had been, the red zone plan that they had in that second half in particular was really strong from Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. The problem is, it feels like this is just becoming all too common in these big moments. If you're a football fan, you're watching that Super Bowl, there's a good likelihood, in particular if you're listening to this show and listening to me, that you are also watching the college football playoffs. And doesn't it feel like officiating is playing too big of a part in some of these massive games, in the most important games of the season here down the stretch when we're trying to award a championship? Obviously, there was the Michigan-TCU debacle when they took the touchdown off the board and replay. No reason whatsoever that touchdown should have come off the board. There was obviously the targeting late that they reviewed, probably should have been, wasn't. The non-targeting in the Ohio State-Georgia game with Marvin Harrison Jr. at the back of the end zone. That was a massive call and play and change the trajectory of that game. You can make an argument that Ohio State wins the national championship if it wasn't for that call. Ends up Georgia does win the national championship. You can make a strong argument Michigan wins the game and plays for a national championship. So these are singular calls that are making a massive impact. And now listen, we can debate and argue all we want about was it, wasn't it, was it correct, so on and so forth, but I'll get to that in a little bit. Wasn't just college football. As you know, both the AFC and the NFC championship game, there was some controversy surrounding those games. Obviously, the do-over that the Chiefs got, the call in the NFC championship game went the Eagles away. Seahawks, by the way, got the benefit of the doubt in their game late in the season in order to get into the playoffs. Last year, there was the holding call in a similar situation, by the way, late in that game that went against the Bengals, and the Rams end up winning the Super Bowl. So what should we take from that? Why is it more common now? Like, what's going on? Okay, so I think that it would be at least wise of us to take a step back and at least ponder, like, what's happening right now. Well, I do have a couple of theories. Let me just give you one of them. The trajectory with which people that are making the rules in our sport, both college and in the NFL, the trajectory that they've taken the rules have made it really difficult to actually officiate the sport. And I'm going to defend the officials here. And I want everybody to hear this, because you're going to probably pull clips of me later in this show and say, like, oh, Joel was killing the officials. Officials in general do a wonderful job. I mean, they train really hard. They take it very serious. And unfortunately for them, the actual guys on the field, and women, by the way, trying to officiate this wonderful sport, is that the people that have made the rules, both in the college game and in the NFL game, have made it really difficult on them. So in many cases, they're put in an impossible situation. Way too many subjective type penalties that are emphasized in both sports, right? Trying to go more towards the offense or player safety. And so many times these new rules or emphasis of rules make it very difficult on these officials, because they put them in precarious spots late in games where they are entering into subjective areas. Okay. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with what in general is a very good officiating body, left in a precarious spot where they have more subjective calls than they did in the past, at least in my estimation, because of the emphasis of the rules, which leads us to the distinction, or should lead us to the distinction between objective calls and subjective calls. So this is where it all lands for me. When it comes to officiating, and this goes for every single sport, by the way. So obviously we're talking about football here, but this really goes for every single sport. As a competitor, I have a distinct knowledge between the difference of the objective calls in the sport and the subjective calls in the sport. Did he get his feet down inbounds before the white line? Objective. Did the ball cross the goal line? Objective. Like, my whole goal and desire as a competitor is for those calls, the objective calls, get it right. By any means necessary. By any means necessary. Get it right. Every objective call, you should be able to get it right. Now, what does that mean for the subjective calls? The holdings, the pass interference, like those types of, well, you can't always get it right. Now, I would love for you to get it right, but more so as a competitor, my desire, my desire is that you're consistent. So the distinction is as such. For the objective calls, please get it right. Please get it right. I do not want to lose a game because you missed an objective call. That is inexcusable. And for subjective calls, my whole desire is, however you start to call it that way for the rest of the game. I understand as a competitor that can change from game to game. Okay? It's like a strike zone in baseball. Whatever you're calling in the first inning, it better be that way in the ninth inning. Because if you've established, for me as a hitter, that you're not calling the ball that just nicks the outside corner, technically a strike, but you haven't called it a strike all day long. Just nick in the corner. You have squeezed the pitcher all day long. And now I've got 2 strikes. It's the bottom of the 8th or top of the 9th, whatever it is, right? It's the crucial time. I'm a hitter. You've established your zone. Okay, so I'm going based on your subjective strike zone. And now you change it? That's not my fault. That's yours. That's yours. So you can, all you want, all you people out there, and I see you on Twitter, Brady Quinn, I see you out there. it's a hold, blah, he admitted it. It's the letter of the law. The letter of the law does not apply to subjective calls in any sport because it's more about the consistency. It's always been about the consistency. Whatever you start with, you've got to end with. And that was my problem in this Super Bowl. Did you know that that holding call was the first holding of the game? So wait, hold on, time out. You mean to tell me that that little tug of the jersey, which I don't even think affected the play, was the first holding call all day long? And hey, letter of the law, it's a holding? Pound sand. Get over yourself. That doesn't apply. There was clearly a precedent set in the subjective area of holding for the defensive backs, and for that matter, for the offensive and defensive linemen. There was a precedent set, a strike zone set, and it changed late in the game. And that's unfair to the competitors. That's unfair. So when Bradbury says like, well, yeah, I was hoping I was going to get away with it. Yeah, you know why you were hoping you were going to get away with it? Because you did all day. You did all day. And so for the flag to come out there, my problem is with the lack of consistency. That's why it's an awful call. That's why it's an awful call. The other side of this that you've got to understand is like, what was the strike zone set? Well, I already told you that was the first holding call of the entire game. And guess how many defensive pass interferences had been called all day long? Zero. The strike zone had been set. It had been set. And in the subjective area of holding, DPI, those little things, Bradbury was playing by the strike zone that was set. If you want to say that the ball hit the corner and in K zone, technically it was a strike, and every time there's a little grab. If it wasn't a hold in the first quarter, it shouldn't have been a hold in the fourth quarter. So we have to have a distinction between what we think of when it comes to objective calls and when it comes to subjective calls. And then the last thing when it comes to officiating, and this is another and a more overarching point I think about officiating, is I've heard people, and in particular out on social media, start to talk about and have the conversation of like, well, should the moment matter? Yes. Obviously, the moment should matter. I've gone back and forth on this in my life, but yes, the moment should matter. The bottom line for me is that when the outcome of the game is like directly in question, obviously it's in question during the course of the game, but when it's directly in question, the play, the call had better affect the outcome of that play. It better, in basketball, in baseball, whatever, like it better affect the outcome of the play and fall into the strike zone that you set in the subjective area during the course of the game. If it doesn't affect the play, man, it feels like you're trying to make yourself a part of the game as an official. And as a competitor, that's what I despise more than anything else. So why did I tweet that I thought it was an awful call? Because of all of those reasons. Objective and subjective needs to matter. Moment needs to matter. And the fact of the matter is that the consistency that had been set during the course of that great, phenomenal Super Bowl was the fact that there were 0 holding calls to that point and 0 defensive pass interferences to that point. And that's the flag thrown to award the Vince Lombardi trophy? Come on. So all of you out there that are letter of the law people, I just don't buy it. I feel like you're trying to be contrarian, and I disagree with you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.